Hello everyone, it's Becca from Becca Books and Bujo, and today we are talking about all of the books I read in October. It is my most dreaded time of the month where I have to wrap up all of the books I read. Especially this month, I had a terrible reading month, so I'm not super excited to talk about these books. Well, I shouldn't say that. There was like a couple really great ones, but for some reason, it's such a daunting thing to talk about the books that I read in the previous month. It's my least favorite video to come and talk to you about. So if you have any suggestions on how I could make my reading wrap-ups more exciting or easier for me to talk about, I would appreciate any and all comments down below. What I don't hate talking about is the statistics for my reading in October, so let's just jump right into that. This was maybe my smallest reading month for amount of books read. I read 9 books, but the pages were actually kind of right on par with 3,926 pages. As far as genre, I read 1 contemporary, 1 fantasy, 2 historical, 1 horror, 1 mystery, 1 romance, and 2 thrillers. All across the board, which is great. I think that really reflects who I am as a reader. As far as audience, 6 of these books were adult books, 2 were young adult, and 1 was a middle grade. Lastly, for format, I read 2 of these books strictly physically. 5 of them were on audio, and 2 of them were a combination between physical and audio. My average rating, I think this is my lowest average rating of the entire year, was a 3.72. Usually I'm in the 4s, so this was definitely a low reading month. Okay, let's start with the lowest book on my rating scale, because it seems fitting to talk about what brought my average down. House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. I could rate this book 1 star. I could rate this book 5 stars. I could rate this book no stars whatsoever. This book was just absolutely confusing, and the reason I decided to end up on 3 stars is because I loved the way I had to read this book so much, but I hated the actual process. So right smack dab in the middle with 3 stars. If you want my full thoughts on this book and what this book is truly about, I have a spoiler vlog where I read this book literally for the entire month of October, and so you can check that out. I'll link it above in the cards. But basically, we follow a gentleman who lives in a house that is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. There's this hallway that appears where it should just be a closet, and he goes and explores and finds a cave, a pit. Yeah, it's spooky, weird, but I think the coolest part about it is that the way you read it, it makes you feel like you are in the house trying to discover along with the narrator. So I don't know. I'm at a loss for words with this book, but we're just going to say 3 stars for now. My next 3 star was a reread. Kind of a surprising 3 star just because I loved the first book so much in this series, but this is my middle grade for the month. This is The Wright 3 by Blue Balliet. This is the second in the Chasing Vermeer series. I'm not sure the series is actually called, but the first book is Chasing Vermeer. I loved Chasing Vermeer when I was a middle grader, and I reread it a couple of years ago and really enjoyed it also then. So I thought, why not continue on with the series? I remember enjoying this when I was younger, but this time it just felt a little flat. It felt really juvenile, while still a fun mystery, definitely for a middle grader. In this one, we follow Petra, Calder, and Tommy as they are discovering something hidden inside of a Frank Lloyd Wright house. The city slash community slash university that the Frank Lloyd Wright house is built on is threatening to demolish the house. Oh no, here it is. Finally coming back to me, remembering. I know what I'm talking about. Many different museums around the world are going to cut this house into like 4 parts so that various museums around the world can have some of Frank Lloyd Wright architecture. And Petra, Calder, and Tommy that think that this is an abomination, and so they're going to do whatever they can to make this not happen, along with their 6th grade class. I believe they're in 6th grade. Anyway, Tommy lives next door to this Frank Lloyd Wright house and is seeing some spooky things inside. And so it's a fun mystery thriller trying to figure out what is going on with this house. Weird that my last book was also about a haunted house. It's like it was a spooky month or something. Okay, I digress. It was an okay book. I think younger people would get more out of it than I would as a 20-year-old woman. I'm more than 20. Almost 30-year-old woman. Okay, the next book I read was a borrowed book. I'm working on my goals here to read all of the books that I've borrowed on my shelves. And this was a book from my mother. This is called Black Widows by Kate Quinn. Another mystery thriller kind of book. In this one, a man is found dead, and the 3 suspects are his 3 wives. That's right. We are in Utah. They are Mormons, and they have a polygamous relationship. And so this man Blake is married to Rachel, Tina, and Emily. I'm surprised I got Blake and Rachel. So Rachel, Tina, and Emily. Rachel is kind of like the trophy Mormon wife. She knows everything that she should be doing and does it perfectly. Tina is the rebel. Blake picked her up kind of at a AA meeting or something, maybe even a rehab facility. A little odd. And Emily is this young, naive Catholic girl that he found. Weird. I don't get the polygamous lifestyle, but the story was interesting and kept me reading. At some points you think it's all 3 of the wives, at some points you think it's none of the wives, and I did call who was the killer at the end, but it was still thrilling trying to figure that out at the end. I ended up giving this 3 stars. It was an okay read. Jumping up to 3.5 stars, we have The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin. I feel like this trope is kind of going around with this and The Measure and Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo, but books where you can predict your death date and decide what you do with that knowledge. So in this book, 4 siblings go to this fortune teller, and this fortune teller tells them when they are very, very young what day they will all die on. And each sibling takes that news differently, but one of them in particular decides that he is going to change his life because his death date was maybe sooner than expected, and he's going to change his life so that he can live to the fullest. We follow each sibling as they're approaching their death date. We follow the youngest first, and then the next youngest, second oldest, and the oldest. And it was just very interesting to see how this knowledge affected their life. I buddy read this with my friend Jane, and we had some good discussions about what we would do in their case. And for both her and I, that's just knowledge that we don't think we need to know. I think my life and the way I live would not change if I knew that date, and I wouldn't want to know that date. I would rather kind of live in the dark in that aspect. Also, I was expecting like a little bit more magical realism, thrilling aspect to this, and that just wasn't there. It was definitely more of a literary fiction, contemporary story about these 4 siblings, which I normally like, but I think my expectations were off, and so that just threw me off a bit. Anyway, 3.5 stars for this. I still just absolutely love the cover, and it screams fall to me. The other book I gave 3.5 stars to is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. I strictly listened to this one, so I don't have a physical book to hold up. I feel lost. This one I bought on Audible a long, long time ago, probably when it first came out in 2019, and it had been sitting in my Audible library for that long. And I'm glad I finally got to get to it. Again, thanks, Jane. Jane, you are a real reading pal. Jane was reading this, and I saw it on her Goodreads, and that's how I ended up picking it up through my TBR game. Anyway, let's talk about the book. In this one, we follow 3 different perspectives. It is a fantasy, which is, again, a little out of my comfort zone, but a very easy to digest fantasy. The magic was easy to understand, and story building was pretty good, spot on, easy for someone like me. I think probably because it's a YA, Is it a YA? I think it's a YA. Anyway, 3 perspectives. We follow Zaylee, who is a diviner, meaning her mother was a magi and had magic. And so as a diviner, she has some special powers, but magic was taken away by the king. Speaking of the king, we follow the king's 2 children. He has a daughter named Amari and a son named Iman. And Amari is super against her father taking magic from people and hurting people because of their magical powers. So she runs away and ends up meeting up with Zaylee and her brother Zane and tries to help them restore magic. Iman hates magic, but somehow has magic, and he is going to fight his inner magic and the magic around him by getting rid of magic altogether. So there are some fun battle scenes, and like it's this cool quest that these young people go on to try to restore magic, but it lost me in parts. It did end on a cliffhanger, so I might want to continue on in the series. This is the Legacy of Orisha, maybe. Yeah, maybe I'll continue on. It was a good audiobook. Bonnie Turpin narrated it, so that gave it a tick in the positive, but again, it was just kind of like some parts I completely zoned out. Other parts I was like, here for it. I want to keep listening. So I don't know. That's a 3.5 for me. Now we're on to the 4 stars. The very first book I read this month, and really mostly read in September, but finished it in October. This is Where the Forest Meets the Stars by Glendy Vandera. Glendy Vandera has been a really great author for me so far. I've read 3 of her books. I think she only has 3 books. So one of them was a 5-star, this one was a 4-star, and then her Oceanography of the Moon, I think I gave 3. But The Light Through the Leaves, love that book. Anyway, we're talking about Where the Forest Meets the Stars. This is about a woman who studies birds, and she lives kind of in the middle of nowhere in Illinois, studying birds. And one day, a young girl, like 8, 9 years old, shows up on her doorstep and says she's from the stars. And obviously the main character, can't think of her name, and her neighbor, who she befriends, thinks that this little girl is in a lot of trouble, but every time they go to the police, the little girl runs away. And so they're in a little bit of a pickle, but they decide that the well-being of this girl is more important than reporting her to the authorities, and so they are going to care for this girl, give her the food and shelter and love that she needs, and try to figure out who she is along the way. Yeah, it gets pretty thrilling and exciting toward the end when you start to find out who this girl is. What's her name? Nova? I don't think that's right. Right? No. She's named after the star that she came from. Yeah, I liked it. I enjoyed my time with it. I liked the found family aspect, the girl finding who she really loves, and this woman who was kind of a loner before was able to strike up a really great friendship with her neighbor and become like a mother to this young girl. So, 4 stars. Really good. Let's see. Next, I actually have a book. The Ex Hex by Erin Sterling. This was just a fun romance that I wanted to get to in October because it's witchy and fun. Let's see. We start 9 years ago, and Vivi has just had a bad breakup. So her and her cousin decide that they are going to put a hex on the man that she broke up with, or who broke up with her. And it's kind of like a joke in the beginning because they're using a Bath and Body Works candle, so they're like, no way can this be a real hex. Oh, by the way, there's actually magic. It's kind of like Halloween Town. There's a magical town in the middle of Georgia. Anyway, going back to the candle. Bath and Body Works candle, no way that this hex can actually work. But 9 years later, when this man returns to Glen Hollow? Graves Glen. Okay, he comes back for like their 50th anniversary, 150th, some sort of big celebration, town celebration, and also to, boost the magic in the town a little bit. I didn't get that part, but anyway, when he returns to the town, there is indeed a hex put on him. A curse where bad things happen to him all the time. And so while they are trying to reverse this curse, of course there are feelings that are starting between, what's his name? Reese. Of course it's Reese. Always the hot men are Reese. I'm thinking of Akatar. Anyway, Reese and Vivi rekindle their romance that they had 9 years ago and manage to save the magic of the town. Sorry, that was a spoiler. But it's a romance. What can you expect? It's got to end happy and good. This was just a really fun time. Enjoyed it. Liked the romance. Steamy and fun. I gave it 4 stars. We're up to a 4.5 star, and I think it could have been a 5 if I listened to it. I had many people tell me that the full cast audiobook is a winner, but it was a 4.5 star physically. This is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This was really fun. We follow a senior in high school named Pippa. For her senior capstone project, she is going to try to solve a murder that happened a couple of years ago in her town. A high school senior at the time was murdered, and her boyfriend at the time was accused of the murder, but he had also committed suicide, so there was no way to actually prove it. And for some reason, Pippa believes that that boyfriend was innocent. So she decides for her capstone, she's going to figure out who the actual murderer was and solve this case. Super fun. It was told in like interviews and various entries in her documents that she was using to write her paper, capstone, whatever. She ends up teaming up with the brother of the boy who was first accused, and they figure it out. It is fun twists and turns along the way. You are really in their minds about their thought processes and who they think it is, how they got to that conclusion. And while I did figure it out who the murderer was, even the murderer wasn't quite the full answer to the whole case. So it definitely kept you guessing, kept you on your toes, and I'm really looking forward to continuing the series in November because I got the second book, Good Girl, Bad Blood, on my November TBR. So super fun, and I'm maybe going to listen to that one to just get the full effect of the full cast audio, but yeah, super fun. I loved it. Loved it. But for a book I loved even more, 5-star, possibly a new favorite, just such a great book, and I'm so glad I finally read it. We Have the Help by Catherine Stockett. Sorry for my tacky Target sticker, but this was one of these books will self-destruct in 12 months if I don't read them, and we are cutting it close, friends. November 15th is the cutoff, and I finished it in October, started it in October, finished it, read it in October, however you want to say it. This was so fun. Many, many years ago, I watched the movie, like probably when it first came out with my parents. I don't even know when the movie came out, but reading this book was a delight. I kind of had scenes come back into my memory from reading the book that happened in the movie, and now I just can't wait to watch the movie. If you don't know what this book is about, we follow a few different perspectives, but mainly I would say we follow Skeeter Phelan? Skeeter Phelan? I just listened to the audio, so I don't actually know. It sounded like Skeeter Phelan, like F-E-E-L-I-N apostrophe. I know that's not right. Anyway, we follow Skeeter. She is an aspiring author, and when she had applied for this great big editing job in New York, one of the women there, one of the editors, kind of takes her under her wing and says, I'll give you a shot. Write something that you are interested about. And Skeeter decides, because of the amazing impact that her black maid had on her growing up, she was going to write about white families in the South who have black maids as their help. And so she interviews mainly Aibileen, who is just like this wonderful lady. I loved her, and I loved May Mobley, and now I want to call my daughter May Mobley because her name is Mabel. Anyway, she mainly starts interviewing Aibileen, gets all of her stories, and Aibileen is a wonderful writer herself, and so they kind of co-authored the book. But then, as more terrible things start happening to the women in the South, the Black community of maids, more women decide that they are going to help with this project. And so we get Minnie, who is hilarious and can never keep a job because she speaks her mind and isn't afraid to hurt her white employer. She does some nasty things, friends. But she finally finds an employer who wants to be more her friend. And it was a white woman who came from a very low socioeconomic status. And so the white woman is basically just wanting to be friends with her maid. Anyway, I'm going into too much nitty gritty. It is a story about Black women in the South who love and care for white families, and ultimately how they raise a lot of white children and what that does to them, what that does to the white children, and how they should be treated better. It was such a great book. I cannot wait to watch the movie and see it all come to life, even though I have such great imagery from this text in the first place. My 5-star, my only 5-star of October. Like I said, kind of a bummer reading month that this was my only 5-star, but I mean, it was a month I will not forget with this guy. So here are the books I read in October, minus Children of Blood and Bone and Where the Forest Meets the Stars. Let me know if you've read any of them, and oh, they're falling over, and what you thought of them, if you agreed with my thoughts or not. I'd love to have some bookish conversation with you down below. And also in the comments, tell me how I could make these reading wrap-ups more exciting for you, for me. What could we do different, friends? I'd love some feedback. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Like this video on your way out. Consider subscribing to my channel if you would like to see any more bookish and bullet journaling content from me. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.